In the 1800s, the road that I'm on was the main wagon road from Alexandria to Sparta. So unlike today when it's, sparsely populated and not much traffic, in the 1800s it would have been a major thoroughfare. Now, somewhere down here is another cemetery. Now, I don't know if it's a cemetery or a single grave. I've never been to it before. The road is surprisingly good. Last time I was on this road, it was really muddy and hard to get through. When I got permission to search this area, I forgot to ask for the key to the gate. Oh well, it's a nice day for a walk. The place I'm looking for is only about half a mile from here. You always have to be careful when you're walking out here. Look at this right here. I'm not going to mess with you. This is a western ribbon snake, which is common in Louisiana. They're not poisonous and are normally found near water because their diet consists mostly of minnows, fish, tadpoles, and small insects. See him sticking his tongue out, smelling at me. Where are you gonna go now? And I'm gonna leave him right where he is. Now this is a serious fence here. Let me show you this. See the post there denoting a property line? Look what they use. Most of the time they use barbed wire. This is steel cable. Now that is serious right there. Look at this large piece of concrete here. This is a property corner. It says U.S. Coast and Geodetic Survey, Triangulation Station. Before GPS became readily available, survey triangulation markers were used by surveyors for map making and for finding property lines. Wow. I usually say adventuring ain't easy, but in this case, looks like we have old roads that lead right to where we're going. That's lucky. Remember what I just said about adventuring ain't easy? Where we're going is right in the middle of that thickness right there. We should have to find a way in. I'll hold this camera up above. See that oak tree right there? I think that's where we're going. I'll show you where we are here. Yeah, I see another headstone leaning against that tree. See if we can get to it. Well, this certainly could be classified as a lost grave. And notice there's another one over there. I see another one through there. I think I see another one there, but I'm not sure. This one is Henry Babers, son of John Babers, born August 30th, 1817, died 1891. Now this is the grave of Henry Babers. I'm going to show you. That's the footstone for this headstone, which leads me to believe that this headstone has been moved. Most people in this area bury their loved ones facing the east. And I'm not sure this one's facing the east, so we're gonna test that and see. A handy compass out here. Okay, that way is north, east, southwest. So this headstone is facing a little bit southwest, which leads me to believe that this headstone has been moved, probably by a logging operation at some point. But I see the other graves out here, so let's take a look at those. There's a footstone for a WB. Look at this, there's a headstone just leaning up against a tree. And here's one. Now look at these ironstones. They usually denote a grave. Catherine Waters, wife of Henry Babers. This is why I research these old graves and headstones, is so they're not forgotten. And so they're actually located so family members who want to can come pay their respects, or actually have genealogical information on their family members. It's very sad to come out here and see it in this state. It definitely needs to be cleaned up, and maybe I can get permission from the landowner to do some of that cleaning. This is the grave of William Babers, son of John Babers, born October 5th, 18, feels like 20. I can't tell if that's a 20 or what. Died July 22nd, 1884. Now this headstone has also been moved because it's facing south as well. Well, let's look around and see how many others we can find out here. I don't see any through this thick underbrush. I'm putting up flagging around these graves so I can locate them later, and so they'll be easier for other people to locate. Oh, I see another headstone right over here. You see it right there, straight through the woods. There's a footstone right there. Let's get around to it. Oh, another couple of graves. Oh, 3 graves. This is a grave of Elizabeth Babers, wife of John Snelling, S-N-E-L-L-I-N-G, died August 15th, 1864. And what I'm doing, I'll get the GPS coordinate on my GPS, handheld GPS unit here, and then I'll take a picture on my phone. And I know you're thinking, but you have GPS on your phone. It's not even close to being as accurate as this handheld GPS. And I always take a picture with the headstone, so when I'm doing my research, I can make sure that I'm accurate. And this next one is a headstone for Alpha Lard, wife of John Babers, No birth date or death date listed on this one. And then there's one more right behind me. This one is for John Baber Sr., born 1794, died August 16th, 1864. Wow. To put John Baber Sr., his timeline in perspective, he was born in 1794. The President of the United States was George Washington. Wow. And when he died, 1864. So he was born when George Washington was president and died during the Civil War. That's pretty impressive. Now these headstones are facing east, but they're not lined up just right, so it makes me think that they've been moved or just shifted a little bit. I don't know that they've been moved too far from their original location, but they've been at least shifted. And probably the easiest way to know if there would be other graves out here would either be to clean up this whole area, or if I had a drone with LiDAR. One day I will have LiDAR. One day. I don't see any more, but we're going to explore the area just to be sure. I assume since I've found 2 footstones, I assume I'm going to find more. So far we found 5 graves, I think it was. 1, 2, 3, 6 graves, and I've seen, I think, 3 footstones. So I know there are more out here. Let's see what else we can find. One of the things I always try to learn when I find lost graves like this is, why are they here? Where did the people come from? We'll take a look at this. Sometime between the fall of 1848, when John's last child was born, and the summer of 1850, John, Alpha, and several of their children traveled some 750 miles from Barnwell, South Carolina, to the southern tip of Bienville Parish. On June the 10th, 1850, John purchased 40 acres of property in Bienville Parish from the government at about $1.25 an acre. 2 years later, he purchased another 40 acres. By the time of his death in 1864, John had accumulated several hundred acres in this area. Traveling from South Carolina to Bienville Parish in a wagon took a long time. The family would have traveled between 8 and 20 miles per day, depending on the weather, road conditions, and the health of the travelers. Under the best of circumstances, this trip would have taken about 5 weeks. If conditions were poor the whole way, the trip could have lasted more than 3 months. When Hollywood movies portray immigration by covered wagon, they usually show all the people riding on horses or in the wagons. In reality, most of the family would have walked. The wagon was used to transport all of their worldly possessions and, most importantly, their food supply. Alpha and the children who were too young to walk would have ridden in the wagon. John and the oldest of the boys would have taken turns driving the wagon. Now let's take a look at what the land looks like today. The landowner had planted acres of this longleaf pine tree. Now most of what we find around here is these loblolly pine trees, and I'm going to show you the difference here. Why they're called longleaf pine, this is a piece of pine straw from the loblolly. This is a piece of longleaf from a tree about the same age, maybe a little older, but you can definitely see the difference in the length of them. Longleaf pines are underutilized species of pine tree. They're more resistant to pests and diseases than loblolly. They're more tolerant to drought conditions, but they're more susceptible to wildfire due to their bark and longer needles. Loblolly pines grow somewhat faster, which makes them ideal for commercial purposes such as construction work, building houses and whatnot. The leaves of the pine needles can grow up to 10 inches long, but the longleaf pine needles can grow nearly twice that long. Another thing that stands out about the longleaf is look at how few branches there are compared to the loblolly. It's maybe a fourth the number of branches. Now the old Baber's house place is just over here. Let's take a look. Look at these old oak trees. Wow. This is the location of the Baber's home place. Behind me is the old Baber's house place. There was a house here until sometime in the 1940s. Now, the trees, you'll see they're kind of in a grid pattern. The house would have been right in the middle of them, like right where my head is right now. Would have been right in the middle of that. And the purpose of that would have been shade in the summertime. Now, the graves are just about 300 yards this way in front of the house place. Other than the area where their house would have been, and maybe a barn or two, the rest of this area would have been in cotton production. Now they would have had a small garden for fruits and vegetables and stuff like that, but the most of it would have been for cotton production for sale. Everything you see would have been cotton. Cotton was king in the pre-Civil War era of the South. And why would they have wanted so much land? Well, the more land you have, the more cotton you can produce, the more cotton you can sell, the more money you can make. You wanted as much land to grow cotton, then you would harvest that cotton, put it on a boat. From here, they probably would have gone to Lake Bistineau and down the Red River, down to New Orleans, possibly over to Monroe, down the Washita River. But anyway, they wanted to get the cotton to New Orleans. The cotton was put on a ship from New Orleans, sent to England to the textile mills. Then it was manufactured into textiles. Then the material was sent back for us Americans to consume. Sounds like a long way around, but that's the way it worked. The Baber's family would have had a large workforce to work such a large expanse of land. But when they originally moved here, they had to clear this land. Now what they normally would have done in this case is the family moves in, you clear a small area of land that winter while you're not in production to get it ready for the next spring's planting season. You would plant, and after you harvested your crop that time, then you'd start again. You'd clear more land and you'd build your way out. And once you got to the edge of your land, then it was time to get more land and continue the process of expansion. Now let's head back to the graves and I'll explain what my research has uncovered about the Baber's family. In 1794, John Babers was born in Campbell, Virginia, which is about 65 miles northwest of Richmond. While still a child, his family moved to Barnwell, South Carolina, which is about 100 miles northwest of Charleston. On September 4th, 1836, John married Alpha Lard in South Carolina. Her grave is right here. You can see that these graves are definitely hard to get to. September the 4th, 1836, John married Alpha Lard in South Carolina. Together they had 9 children. One of their children was Elizabeth, or Lizzie as she was called, Babers. Her grave is right behind me. This is the headstone of Elizabeth Babers. They called her Lizzie. She was the 8th child of John and Alpha. In 1860, she married John Snelling. 4 years later, 20-year-old Lizzie contracted typhoid fever. She died on August 15, 1864. Her father, over here, John Babers, died the following day from the same disease. In the 1800s, typhoid fever was a disease which everyone feared. It was almost always fatal. Doctors referred to the disease by a telling word: poison. Doctors eventually learned that typhoid fever was spread to healthy people who drank contaminated water. Elizabeth and her father John undoubtedly drank from the same water source. This photo shows some of the ways a water well could become contaminated. Waste from the outhouse, wastewater from doing the laundry and bathing, and waste poured directly onto the ground could seep into the water well and contaminate the main source of drinking water. The first symptom of typhoid fever was, maybe you guessed it, high fever, which could rise to about 104 degrees. After a couple of weeks of high fever, the infected person experienced abdominal pain and other stomach symptoms such as diarrhea or constipation. Some people got rose spots, which were small pink rash-like dots on the skin. Hallucinations were common. In the third week, the infected person experienced internal bleeding and inflammation of the brain, which was usually fatal. Since the discovery of antibiotics in the early 1900s, typhoid fever is now treatable. But we need to know about John Baber's first marriage. And for that, we need to go to another cemetery, one in Friendship, Louisiana, just a few miles up the road here. Friendship Baptist Church was founded in 1840, 8 years before the creation of Bienville Parish. In 1848, the Louisiana State Legislature created Bienville Parish from the southern half of Claiborne Parish. I'm in the Friendship Cemetery in Friendship, Louisiana, Bienville Parish. I'm looking for another grave to show you, and I haven't located it yet. You know, John's first wife was Martha Elkins. They married in 1815 and had 11 children together, the last of which was Joseph Christian Babers. He was born on January the 9th, 1835. This is an important date in the Babers family because John's wife Martha died during childbirth. She died on the same day that her son was born. She was just 46 years old. She's buried in the Williams Cemetery in Barnwell, South Carolina. Her grave is marked with a small stone such as this one, but there are no carvings on it, no names, no dates, anything like that. Whether it's been weathered away by rain over the years or whether it never had any etchings on it at all, we don't know. I've requested a photo of this stone but haven't received it yet. But I'm looking for another grave to show you. So I'm going to keep looking. Whitlow, Maria Teresa Rayborn. I'm getting close. Permelia Whitlow. This must be it. Joseph C. Babers. I'm happy to say that the child, Joseph, survived. In 1855, he married Permelia Whitlow, daughter of Maria Teresa Whitlow Rayborn. That's her broken headstone right back here that we need to repair. Now, Maria Teresa and her second husband Sam owned and operated Rayborn Salt Works here in Friendship. Now, this was a major operation during the Civil War, which provided salt for the surrounding area. People as far away from Arkansas, Mississippi, Alabama came to get the salt at Rayborn Salt Works because during the Civil War, the federal government put a blockade on the transportation of salt. So the only way they could get it, they couldn't get it from any of the coastal salt mines. They had to get it from the interior. And Rayborn Salt Works was a very important source of salt for this whole area. Now, Joseph enlisted at Brush Valley and served in the 28th Louisiana Infantry, known as Gray's Regiment, during the Civil War. He was wounded in battle and died on September 2nd, 1864, in Sicily Island, Louisiana. At the time of his death, he held the rank of corporal. But what about the other graves at the Rayborn Cemetery? We need to go back there and take a look. Now, when I'm looking for graves, one of the things I'm looking for is depressions in the earth. Now, let me point this out to you. You can see right here, there's a depression right here, and there's another deep depression right here. Now, if you look at this depression lines up with this head marker. I'm going to demonstrate what the soil does after someone is buried. This is the ground, right? And they've dug this hole for a casket. Now this ground is really compacted ground. When they put the casket in there and refill it with this dirt, that's loose dirt. Now over time, when this packs, water will push down around this casket until the casket eventually collapses. But it will push down this way and it will leave gaps in the soil here and here, leave depressions. And that's just displacement. But that's why it's important when you're looking for graves that you look for those depressions, and they'll be about the width, a little over the width of a casket. So by using this information, we can look at these depressions along these 3 graves and the other graves to see if the headstones have been moved at any point, to see if they're where they should be. Now these are facing east and that one has a footstone, so we know it's in the general position. And we just looked at this one and it lines up, the depressions line up with this headstone. But what about the others? All right, so I'm going to put flags around these depressions to signify where this grave is. Looks like it goes to about here. Young Lizzie, 20 years old. I'm noticing that Alpha's headstone here is facing southwest and it's not perfectly lined up with these graves. And I see a deep depression right here. So I'm going to mark this. This is going to be where her grave actually is, which lines up with the footstone down here. And that will be east rather than southeast. Yep, and that's got the initials AB on it. That's going to be a spot for hers. And John Baber's. Yep, I see depressions here as well. It's too thick to get right in there, but it would be lined up right that way. Henry Babers and William Babers were sons of John Babers and Martha Elkins. Henry Babers married Catherine Waters, who's buried right behind me. Well, her headstone is right behind me. It is broken and it has been moved because it's facing the wrong direction. It's facing south. So I assume it was broken during probably a logging operation. But this grave I know is moved as well because it's facing south and it's leaning up against a tree, and his footstone over here is also facing south. This is not the area for a grave. I'm looking around for more depressions in the ground, but I don't see any because it's so thickly overgrown. This is the headstone I mentioned for Catherine Waters, the wife of Henry. I want to point out these 2 pieces of ironstone here. These would be grave markers, maybe a headstone and a footstone, or maybe 2 headstones. I'm really not sure. I highly suspect that there are other graves out here that I'm just not seeing for the dense foliage here. Now I know John Baber, some of his children, their graves are unaccounted for, and they died during this period. So it's very likely this was another child, or maybe a spouse of a child of John Baber's. This is the headstone for Henry Baber's, husband of Catherine Waters. Now I know that this headstone has been moved because it's facing southwest rather than east. His footstone is actually propped up right behind the headstone. So this marker should be facing that way. Now there was once a big, looks like an oak tree here based on the type of bark. There's an oak tree here. So I know that the grave would have been in this area, real close in this area somewhere, but I'm not exactly sure where. I've messaged the landowners and asked if I could remove some of this underbrush to see if there are other graves out here and to find out where these markers belong, looking for those depressions like I showed you earlier. Hopefully they'll get back with me soon and we can do some cleanup on this cemetery. What I really hope to do for this cemetery is get this underbrush cleaned out so we can see the graves and the family members can actually have an easy time to come and pay their respects. They can do it now, but it's very difficult to get in and out of this place. Now we're probably not 50 yards from an open path, but getting back here is very difficult. I want to get all this underbrush cleaned out and hopefully, with the landowner's permission, put up a fence around this one with a gate on it so it can be properly maintained and protected. You can help with the revitalization of this cemetery and the upkeep and the repairs that are needed to, especially Catherine Waters' grave. I'll leave a link in the description where you can make a donation. Anything helps. Maybe we'll be able to get this place cleaned up and get a fence around it. I'm Brad Dyson. I'll see you soon.